I had never expected that a simple question from my daughter-in-law would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life. "You know, Mom," Sophie said, her voice dripping with sweet poison, "you've been living here too long. I think it's time for you to move on." The words hung in the air, too heavy to be ignored. My heart skipped a beat. She had always been cold, but this was something else. The room seemed to shrink, the warmth of the family home suddenly turning into something suffocating, a place I no longer belonged. I could feel her eyes on me, sharp, calculating. For a moment, I just stared at her, unable to speak. Richard, my son, sat silently next to her, his hands folded in his lap. The man who once promised to care for me, to protect me from harm, was now complicit in this cruel game. I wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I had spent my entire life trying to keep the peace, to be the mother, the wife who did everything right. Now, I was being pushed out like a forgotten piece of furniture. "Sophie," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "what do you mean?" Sophie's smile widened, as though she had been waiting for me to ask. "Well," she began, "you know how much this house costs to maintain. It's just not practical for someone your age." My stomach churned. She wasn't concerned for me. She was concerned for herself. "It's too much for you to handle, Mom," she added, her words like knives stabbing into me. I looked at my son, hoping for a sign that he would defend me, but there was nothing. He simply nodded, agreeing with his wife. "Sophie's right, Mom. You've been here long enough," he said, his eyes avoiding mine. My son, the boy I had raised with love and care. The same boy who used to crawl into my lap for comfort. Now, he couldn't even meet my gaze. The reality of it hit me like a ton of bricks. I wasn't wanted. I wasn't needed. All these years of sacrifices, of being the pillar of this family, and this is how it ends. I had been a mother to them both, but now I was a burden. I could feel the tears welling up. But I refused to let them fall. Not in front of her. Not in front of him. "I can take care of myself," I replied, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "This is my home. Your father and I built this life together. I'm not going anywhere." Sophie's smile faltered for a moment, but only for a second. Then she straightened, her tone turning even colder. "It's not about what you want, Evelyn," she said. "It's about what's best for everyone. This house is too big for just you. You need to move on. Find somewhere more suitable." I stood up slowly, my legs trembling beneath me. I had to leave before I broke down in front of them. "I'll think about it," I said, though I knew the truth. I didn't need to think about it. I had already made up my mind. I would leave. I would walk away, just like they wanted me to. But it wouldn't be the end. No, this was just the beginning. I could feel the rage building inside me, but I kept it buried, locked away. One day, they would understand the price of their cruelty. I would make sure of it. I had spent the next 2 days in a haze, the weight of Sophie's words lingering in the back of my mind. I tried to go about my usual routine, but everything felt different. The house, once filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation, was now eerily silent. I moved through it like a ghost, doing the small tasks I had always done, setting the table, folding the laundry, dusting the shelves, but it felt like I was playing a part in someone else's life, not my own. I had always prided myself on being the glue that held this family together, the one who made sure everything ran smoothly. But now, I felt like an outsider in my own home. The days blurred into one another, the mornings quiet and slow, the evenings even more so. Daniel had stopped coming by, his calls fewer and farther apart. Sophie, of course, was always too busy with her own life to spend time with me. I could sense the coldness growing between us, like a wall slowly being built, brick by brick. I tried to push it aside, to ignore the gnawing feeling in my chest that told me something was wrong, but it was becoming harder and harder to do. I was being replaced, not just in their lives, but in this house. The house Richard and I had built together, the house where we had raised our children, now felt like a place I no longer belonged. One afternoon, I sat in the living room, staring at the family photos on the wall. There were so many memories, so many moments that I had cherished, but now they all seemed distant, like fragments of a life that no longer existed. I ran my fingers over the edge of the photo frame, the cool glass offering no comfort. The sound of the front door opening startled me, and I looked up to see Sophie standing in the doorway. She was dressed in her usual way, expensive, perfectly put together, and there was that look in her eyes, the one that made me feel like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. Evelyn, she said, her voice as cold as ice. I've been thinking about what we talked about the other day. My heart skipped a beat. I knew where this was going. She wasn't going to back down. She had made up her mind, and nothing I said was going to change it. I think it's time for you to start looking for a place, Sophie continued, stepping further into the room. You can't stay here forever. I felt a sharp pang in my chest, but I refused to let it show. I'm not going anywhere, I replied, my voice steady, though inside, I was trembling. Sophie raised an eyebrow, as though she was surprised by my response. Don't be stubborn, Evelyn. You've got to face the facts. This house is too much for you to manage on your own. I stood up slowly, my knees aching from the years of taking care of everything around here. I've managed just fine for years, Sophie, I said, my tone hardening. I don't need you to tell me what I can and can't do. Sophie crossed her arms, her lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Fine. Keep pretending you're fine. But we both know the truth. She turned to leave, but paused at the door. You know, I've been thinking about what to do with this house. It's worth a lot, you know. Maybe we could sell it. There's a lot of potential here. The words hit me like a slap in the face, but I said nothing. I didn't need to. I could feel the truth sinking in. This wasn't just about me not being able to take care of the house. This was about Sophie wanting what I had. The house, the memories, everything Richard and I had built. It was all part of her plan. I watched her walk out of the room, leaving me standing there, alone with the realization that my family had turned their backs on me. Sophie was right about one thing. I was no longer wanted here. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't going to leave without a fight. Not this time. I spent the next few days in a fog, trying to ignore the gnawing sense of betrayal that was eating at me. The house felt even colder now, the walls closing in on me. Sophie's words echoed in my mind, each repetition sharper than the last. It was becoming harder and harder to pretend like everything was fine. I would do the dishes, clean the windows, and make sure the house looked just as it always had, but it was empty now. Richard wasn't here to smile at me and reassure me that everything would be okay. He was gone, and Sophie had made it clear that I wasn't welcome anymore. I couldn't help but feel like a stranger in my own home. The silence was suffocating. The days stretched on, and yet, the longer I stayed in this house, the more I felt the weight of Sophie's plan bearing down on me. I couldn't ignore it any longer. She was trying to push me out, and I had no intention of letting her win. One evening, as I was sitting in the living room, trying to distract myself with a book, I heard the sound of the front door opening. I looked up to see Daniel walking in, looking as if he had just come from work. He smiled, but it was a weak smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. Hey, Mom, he said, his voice low, almost apologetic. How are you doing? I looked at him, studying his face. It was the first time in weeks that he had come by. I didn't know if it was because Sophie had told him to check on me or if he genuinely cared. I'm fine, I replied, though I didn't feel fine. Just keeping busy. Daniel walked over and sat down on the couch beside me. There was an awkward silence between us, the kind that comes when two people no longer know how to talk to each other. He shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable, before speaking again. I've been meaning to talk to you about something, he said, glancing nervously at me. What's going on with you and Sophie? She told me you were planning to leave, and I don't want that to happen. I could feel my blood run cold. Sophie had been telling him things about me, twisting the truth to make me look like the bad guy. Daniel, I said, keeping my voice calm. You know I'm not going anywhere. This house is mine. Your father and I built it together. Daniel nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. I just think. I don't know. Maybe it's time for a change, he said, his voice uncertain. Sophie thinks it would be better if you found somewhere more manageable. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I had always known that Sophie wanted this house for herself, but hearing it from Daniel felt like the final blow. I stood up, trying to steady myself. This is my home, Daniel. I'm not leaving. My voice shook, but I didn't let him see it. I've spent my life here. This house holds every memory of your father and me. It's not just a building to me. It's where we raised you. Daniel looked away, his face softening. I could see the struggle in his eyes, but he wasn't ready to take a stand. He was still too afraid of Sophie. I just want what's best for you, Mom, he said quietly. I could tell he meant it, but it didn't make the pain any easier to bear. I've always wanted what's best for this family, I said, my voice trembling. But now it seems like no one cares about that anymore. Daniel stood up and walked toward the door, but before he left, he turned back to me. I'll talk to Sophie, he said. But just think about it. Maybe it's time for you to let go. I watched him leave, the door clicking shut behind him. I stood there, frozen, the weight of everything pressing down on me. Sophie had already won, hadn't she? She had turned my own son against me, and now she was taking everything I had left. But I wasn't going to let her destroy me. Not without a fight. I would make sure of it. I spent the next few days trying to gather my thoughts, to understand the full extent of what was happening. It was clear now, more than ever, that Sophie was determined to get what she wanted. And she had Daniel on her side. I knew he was struggling, torn between his loyalty to his wife and the love he had for me. But the truth was, Sophie had him wrapped around her finger. I could see it in the way he avoided eye contact, the way his words lacked conviction. Every time he looked at me, I saw a flicker of doubt, but it was quickly replaced with uncertainty. It was like he was waiting for permission to break free, but Sophie's hold on him was too strong. I couldn't blame him entirely. Sophie had a way of twisting everything, of making herself appear innocent while painting me as the villain. I had always tried to keep the peace, to make everyone happy, but it was clear now that Sophie's happiness came at my expense. That afternoon, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. The cool air felt like a temporary escape from the suffocating silence of the house. As I walked, I couldn't help but notice how everything seemed to have changed. The houses, once familiar and welcoming, now felt like distant memories. I had spent so many years in this neighborhood, raised my children here, and yet now, it all felt so foreign. I thought about Richard, about the life we had built together. How had it come to this? How had his family become so indifferent to me? I reached the park at the end of the street and sat on a bench, taking in the view of the trees that had once been a symbol of stability for me. But even the trees seemed to be changing. The leaves were starting to fall, a reminder that nothing lasts forever. Just like my place in this family. I stayed there for a while, lost in my thoughts, before I made my way back home. As I walked in the front door, I was greeted by the familiar sound of Sophie's voice. She was on the phone, speaking in a low, urgent tone, and I knew instantly that something wasn't right. I didn't want to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help myself. I stood there in the doorway, listening, waiting for the right moment to make my presence known. "It's all set," I heard Sophie say. "I'll take care of the paperwork, and then we can move forward. He'll never see it coming." My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know what she was talking about, but I had a feeling it wasn't good. I took a step forward, hoping to get a better sense of what was happening, but Sophie ended the call abruptly and turned around, a smile plastered on her face. "Oh, Evelyn," she said sweetly. "I didn't hear you come in. How was your walk?" I could feel my stomach tighten. "What were you talking about, Sophie?" I asked, my voice steady but laced with suspicion. She hesitated for a moment, but then shrugged casually. "Oh, nothing important," she said, her tone dripping with false innocence. "Just some business." I knew she was lying. There was something more going on, something she wasn't telling me. But I didn't push it. Not yet. I wasn't going to let her see how much she had gotten under my skin. I simply nodded and walked past her, heading for the kitchen. As I walked, I could feel the walls closing in around me. The tension in the house was unbearable. Sophie had already made up her mind, and nothing I said or did was going to change it. But I wasn't about to let her win without a fight. I was done being the victim. It was time for me to take control, to show Sophie that she had underestimated me. I would find out exactly what she was planning, and when the time came, I would make sure she knew who she was truly messing with. I spent the following day meticulously organizing everything, as if nothing had changed. The house, once my sanctuary, now felt more like a prison. Sophie's words echoed in my mind, but I refused to let them consume me. I had been a mother and a wife for over 40 years, and I wasn't about to let her or anyone else push me out. That evening, after finishing the last of the dishes, I noticed something strange. Sophie's car was parked in the driveway, but there was no sign of her inside. I felt a wave of curiosity wash over me, but I pushed it aside. I had already decided that I wasn't going to let her play her games anymore. I wasn't going to be the passive victim anymore. I knew it was time to get to the bottom of this. I had to find out exactly what she was up to. I made my way to the study, where Richard and I had spent countless hours over the years. It was quiet, almost too quiet, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I glanced over at the desk, where Richard's old papers were still neatly stacked. I hadn't touched them since he passed, not wanting to disturb the remnants of our life together. But tonight, I felt a pull, an overwhelming need to uncover the truth. I moved toward the desk and began sifting through the papers. There were tax forms, old bills, and financial statements, but nothing stood out. Then, I noticed an envelope tucked away in the corner. It was addressed to Sophie, but the handwriting was unfamiliar. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should open it. The curiosity was too strong to ignore. I carefully tore the envelope open and pulled out the letter inside. It was a legal document, a contract of some kind. As I skimmed through it, I felt my stomach drop. It was a real estate contract, signed by Sophie and someone named Mark Davidson. The document stated that the house was being put up for sale, with a large portion of the proceeds to be divided between Sophie and Mark. I felt a rush of anger and disbelief. Sophie had been planning this all along. She had been working behind my back to sell the house, to take everything Richard and I had built together and turn it into a profit for herself. I felt sick to my stomach, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I folded the paper back into the envelope and tucked it into my purse. I needed to confront her, to make her realize that she had underestimated me. But I wasn't going to do it recklessly. I needed a plan, something that would make her see that I wasn't just some old woman she could push around. I went to bed that night with the document in my purse, my mind racing. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to take control of the situation. I called a lawyer I had known for years, one who had helped Richard and me with our personal affairs. I explained the situation to him, and he agreed to meet me later that afternoon. The time had come for me to stand up for myself, to fight for what was rightfully mine. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I wasn't going to let Sophie win. She might think she could control everything, but she didn't know who she was dealing with. I had spent my life taking care of my family, and now it was time for me to take care of myself. I walked into the lawyer's office that afternoon with the document tightly clutched in my purse. My heart was racing, but my hands were steady. I had never imagined that I would be in a situation like this, fighting for my own place in a family that I had spent my entire life nurturing. But here I was, ready to take control. As I sat across from my lawyer, the familiar face of George Matthews, he listened carefully as I explained everything that had happened. The way Sophie had manipulated Daniel, the way she had been secretly plotting behind my back to sell the house. I handed him the envelope with the contract inside, watching as his eyebrows furrowed as he read through it. "This is a serious breach of trust," he said, his voice low and calm. "She can't just do this without your consent, especially with your name on the title of the property." My breath caught in my throat. It was a relief to hear him say those words. It meant that Sophie couldn't just waltz in and take what was mine. "What can we do?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts to remain composed. "We can fight this," George said firmly, his eyes meeting mine. "We'll send her a formal notice that the sale cannot proceed without your approval. And if she tries to move forward with it anyway, we'll take legal action." I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment I would finally take control and show Sophie that I wasn't going to let her steal everything from me. But as I left the lawyer's office, a wave of doubt crept in. What if Sophie didn't back down? What if she decided to go behind my back and sell the house anyway? I knew I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't afford to wait for her to make the next move. I had to act first. I spent the following days gathering everything I could, papers, records, anything that would help me build my case. I knew that Sophie wouldn't give up without a fight, but neither would I. The longer I stayed in this house, the more I realized how deeply it was tied to my identity. It wasn't just a place, it was the life I had built with Richard. It held the memories of our family, of our love, and of all the sacrifices I had made to make sure that everyone else was happy. But now, it was mine to protect. I couldn't let Sophie tear it apart. Every time I saw her, every time she smiled that cold, calculated smile, I felt my resolve harden. She thought she could get away with this. She thought she could manipulate everyone around her, including me. But she didn't understand one thing. I had been protecting my family for years, and now it was time to protect myself. I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. The day came when I received a letter from Sophie. It was a simple note, tucked into an envelope, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. "Evelyn," the letter began, "I've been thinking a lot about what we discussed. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings, but I'm doing what I think is best for everyone. The house is mine now. You can either accept that or continue to make things difficult. It's up to you. I read the letter twice, then 3 times, each time the words becoming more and more clear. Sophie had made up her mind. She was going to sell the house, whether I liked it or not. But that wasn't going to happen. I wasn't going to let her have the last word. I stood up, walking to the table where I had placed the letter. I folded it neatly, putting it in the trash without a second thought. It was over. I had made my decision. Sophie had underestimated me, and now she was going to find out just how wrong she was. I knew the moment I read Sophie's letter that things had escalated beyond repair. I had spent the last few weeks gathering evidence, working quietly behind the scenes, but this was the final straw. Sophie was pushing me to the brink, forcing me into a corner, but I refused to let her control me any longer. I wasn't going to let her take everything I had worked for. I wasn't going to let her destroy the life Richard and I had built together. I had made my decision, and now it was time to take action. The first thing I did was contact George, my lawyer. I could feel my pulse quickening as I dialed his number, but I didn't hesitate. I had already waited too long. I needed to make sure that Sophie's plan would not come to fruition. George, I need to move forward with this, I said as soon as he picked up. I want to stop the sale of the house. I want to make sure Sophie can't sell it without my consent. George was quick to respond, and I could hear the confidence in his voice. We can do that. I'll draft the necessary documents and send a formal notice to Sophie. We'll make it clear that she has no legal right to sell the house without your approval. If she tries to go behind your back, we'll take further action. I felt a surge of relief wash over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control of the situation. I wasn't going to be a passive bystander anymore. Sophie had thought she could push me aside, take everything that belonged to me, but she had no idea what she was up against. I hung up the phone and sat there for a moment, letting the reality of what I was about to do sink in. I had spent my entire life taking care of others, putting my family first. But now it was my turn. I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. A few days later, George called to let me know that the formal notice had been sent to Sophie. I felt a sense of accomplishment, but I knew it wasn't over yet. Sophie wouldn't just accept defeat. She would fight back. I was prepared for that. I had learned over the years to be patient, to wait for the right moment. Now, it was time to wait again. I spent the next few days trying to keep my mind occupied. I kept to my routine, making sure the house was in order. But every time I heard the door open, every time Sophie came into the room with that fake smile, I could feel the tension between us growing. I knew she was plotting something. She was always plotting. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had already taken the first step. She had underestimated me, and I was ready for whatever she threw my way. The confrontation was inevitable. It was only a matter of time before Sophie would show her true colors. When she finally came to me, I could see the frustration in her eyes. "Evelyn," she said, her voice sharp, "you can't stop this. You're too old to be making decisions like this." Her words were meant to hurt, to make me feel small, but I stood my ground. "I don't need you to tell me what I can or can't do, Sophie," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I've been making decisions for this family for years, and I'm not going to stop now." Sophie's expression twisted, her facade cracking. She had underestimated me, and now she was starting to realize it. "You think you can stop me?" she sneered. "You're nothing without this house. It's all I've ever wanted." I felt a surge of anger, but I held it in check. "This house isn't just a piece of property, Sophie," I said quietly. "It's a symbol of everything I've built, and I won't let you destroy it." Sophie's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I saw the true extent of her manipulation. She had been so focused on taking control, on making everything hers, that she hadn't realized how much she had already lost. I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. I could see the fear starting to settle in her eyes, and it felt like the first victory in this long battle. I wasn't going anywhere. This house was mine, and I was going to make sure it stayed that way. I woke up early the next morning, my mind racing with everything that had transpired. I had made my stand, and now I had to see it through. The house, my sanctuary, had become a battlefield, but I was no longer going to be the victim. I had gathered all the evidence I needed, and now it was time to act. I dressed quickly, my movements sharp and deliberate. As I made my way downstairs, I noticed the house felt different today. The air was heavier, as if the walls themselves were waiting for the confrontation that was inevitable. I could hear Sophie's car in the driveway, and I knew that today would be the day she would make her move. I took a deep breath and walked into the kitchen. Sophie was sitting at the table, her phone in her hand, her eyes glued to the screen. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "Good morning," I said, my voice steady, but there was an edge to it. She finally looked up, her expression unreadable. "Morning," she replied, her tone curt. "What's going on today?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation neutral. Sophie raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" she asked, clearly not buying my act. "I've been thinking about your letter," I said, watching her carefully. "You think you can take control of everything, but I'm not just going to let you sell the house without a fight." Sophie's eyes flashed with annoyance, but she quickly regained her composure. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice tight. "I don't need your approval to sell this house, Evelyn." I felt a chill run through me, but I wasn't going to let her intimidate me. "You're wrong, Sophie," I said, my voice firm. "You don't control this house." "I do." Sophie stood up, clearly frustrated. "You're too old for this," she snapped. "You're not in charge anymore. You're just holding on to something that doesn't belong to you anymore. You should be grateful we've let you stay here for so long." Her words stung, but I didn't flinch. "You don't get to decide what belongs to me, Sophie," I said, my voice calm but resolute. "This house is mine. It was always mine, and I'm not going to let you take it." Sophie scoffed, shaking her head. "You're delusional," she muttered, but I could see the fear creeping into her eyes. She wasn't as confident as she had been before. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me any longer. "We'll see about that," I said, walking toward the door. "I've already spoken to my lawyer, and we're taking legal action. You're not going to get away with this." Sophie didn't say anything as I left, but I could feel the tension in the air. I knew she was going to fight back, but I was ready. I had made my move, and now it was time to let the legal system take over. As I walked down the driveway, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had control of the situation. I wasn't going to let Sophie win. Not this time. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything I had worked for. As I drove away, I thought about all the years I had spent taking care of my family, of building a life with Richard. I had given everything, and now it was time to fight for what was mine. Sophie had no idea what she was up against. I arrived at the lawyer's office a few days later, feeling a surge of confidence that I hadn't felt in weeks. The past few days had been filled with tension and uncertainty, but now, standing in front of George, I knew I was finally taking control of my life again. As I sat down across from him, I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "I've sent the notice to Sophie," George said, his voice calm but firm. "She's been given official warning. She can't move forward with the sale of the house without your consent." A sense of relief washed over me, but I wasn't going to let myself relax just yet. I had spent far too long being passive, allowing Sophie to walk all over me, to back down now. "I want to make sure she understands that I'm serious," I said, looking George in the eye. "This isn't just a warning. I'm not going to let her take this house from me." George nodded in agreement. "We'll take the necessary legal steps to make sure she knows she's in violation if she tries to push this any further." I sat there for a moment, letting the words sink in. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was taking action, standing up for myself, for everything Richard and I had built. "Thank you, George," I said, finally breaking the silence. "I just want to protect what's mine." George smiled slightly. "We'll get this sorted, Evelyn. Don't worry." As I walked out of his office, I felt a sense of power that I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to what Sophie was doing. I was making my own decisions, and I was going to fight for what was rightfully mine. The following week, I received a call from Sophie. Her tone was sharp, almost mocking, but I could hear the underlying tension in her voice. "Evelyn, I hope you know that this is not going to end well for you," she said. "You can't stop this. The house will be sold." I could feel my heart racing, but I didn't let her see my fear. "We'll see about that," I said calmly. "You've been warned, Sophie. And if you try to go behind my back again, there will be consequences." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear her teeth grinding. "You're making a mistake, Evelyn," she said, before hanging up. The call left me feeling unsettled, but it also solidified something deep inside me. Sophie wasn't going to stop. She was going to keep pushing until she got what she wanted, but I wasn't going to let her. I had already taken the first step, and I wasn't backing down now. The next few days were quiet, and I couldn't help but wonder if Sophie was plotting her next move. I stayed vigilant, knowing that I had to be ready for anything. And then, one evening, as I was sitting in the living room, I saw Sophie standing in the doorway. She was holding a piece of paper in her hand, and there was an air of finality in the way she walked toward me. "I'm not going to back down," she said, her voice cold. "This house will be mine, whether you like it or not." I didn't flinch. I had already anticipated this. "You can try, Sophie," I said, standing up slowly. "But this is my home, and I'm not leaving without a fight." Sophie's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw the fear in her eyes. She knew I wasn't bluffing. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about everything she had tried to take from me, and I wasn't going to let her have it. "We'll see," she said, before turning and walking out of the room. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding, but I felt a sense of determination settling over me. Sophie had no idea what she was up against. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything I had fought for. The battle wasn't over yet, but I knew that I was finally on the right side of it.